Welcome back to Something in the Wilderness, a podcast to discuss the songs of Andrew McMahon. Today we're focused on a road trip song that you may or may not have heard before, but definitely should. This song represents a very memorable time in Andrew's life when he needed to take a step back and remind himself what was important again. I'll admit right from the get-go, this isn't one of my top songs in the back catalog for me, but there's something special about it and its place in his story. I try to mix it up talking about big hits and deep cuts, and tonight, I'd say we're going deep. From the end of an EP released in between the two most popular Jack's Mannequin albums. Today's song's a B-side from the Glass Passenger era called At Full Speed. The band is, of course, Jack's Mannequin. This was track 4, the final song on the In Valleys EP, released on September 9th, 2008. And along with those other rarities from the In Valleys EP, At Full Speed also appeared on the Glass Passenger Deluxe Edition, which was released March 23rd, 2010. In this deluxe edition is where you'll find it on your streaming services if you haven't heard it before, or you feel like giving it another listen. So essentially the song was a B-side to a single. I'm not sure why that CD... Essentially, the song was a B-side to a single. I'm not sure why it was titled the In Valleys EP, but Swim was the lead track before the album release. So, in hindsight, I view it as more of a promotional single, with a few tracks that didn't make the upcoming album, possibly. The only oddity about this is that Swim wasn't officially released as a single until the following year. Hence, why I'm just going to call it a promotional single. But this reminds me of how Oasis used to release their singles back in the 90s and early 2000s. They weren't the only artists doing that back in the 90s, but Oasis is the band I paid special attention to. There was a point where I had to own a copy of every single song Oasis ever recorded. Much harder to do in the days before MP3s and YouTube and streaming. But in order to do that, I had to go hunt down in actual record stores all of the import CD singles they had released. Back then, I'd say the going rate for a full album was $10 to $12, and these singles, some of which were not easy to find, were somewhere between $10 and $15 for just 1 or 2 or maybe 3 new songs that you couldn't get anywhere else. But this is what Jack's Mannequin EPs like In Valleys, The Ghost Overground, and Dear Jack all felt like. One-off singles with these B-side tracks that you couldn't get anywhere else. Unfortunately, they were all iTunes exclusives as far as I know. Physical copies of In Valleys Unfortunately, they were all iTunes exclusives, so as far as I know, physical copies of In Valleys have never existed anywhere. But if you know any differently, please let me know. Fun fact, a little bit of live history. Fun fact, there is none. It has been confirmed by Andrew himself that this song's never been played in front of a live audience. It isn't surprising based on its status as a B-side. I'm sure there were plenty of Jack's Mannequin fans that never even knew the song existed. He did play it one time on the April 1st, 2020 Instagram live stream, though, which I will link in the show notes. And check it out because that's the only version of it that you can find besides the original studio recording. Like a few of the more rare songs that Andrew played during that 2020 live stream era, as I think I'll start referring to it now, Andrew did have to remind himself and kind of build himself up to play this one. He said the reason he hasn't played it at all is at least in part due to the fact that he's terrified by the piano melody, and he has trouble playing it. It definitely seems like he had to practice this one a few times before the live stream. But can you imagine writing a song, recording it, then never playing it again for over a decade? I'm smiling here just imagining Andrew open up Spotify or Apple or Amazon Music, streaming his own song, relearning how to play it for his fans. He shared with us that night that it made him nervous, but it was also exciting to play new songs, or songs that he said felt new again. It seems like it gets his adrenaline going. So thank you for that experience, Andrew. Always keeping it real. A few songwriting notes here. Andrew mentioned that one theme in his songwriting over the years has always been running away from something, and At Full Speed has this theme as well. This came from his childhood, his family background, regarding how he learned this idea when he was young, that packing up and getting out of town when things went sour was somehow a good solution. The song was written during the Glass Passenger Sessions, which we know was a pretty tumultuous time of his life, personally and in his career. But there were so many times during that time frame that he wanted to just stop for a while, to get in the car and drive away from everything. And you may have heard this story before, but there was a point during the recording of the album where someone at the label wanted something different than what Andrew was writing, and they didn't want to pay for his album anymore. The song was born out of this experience during that time, just getting in the car, driving, and calling his brand new wife and telling her that he's taking a solo road trip across the United States. When he played this one on the live stream in 2020, he did mention that he understood why people would relate to this song in that moment, feeling cooped up and locked down, unsure about the future, with a lack of confidence and hope. I personally hope that if you're listening and you did feel that way, or you do feel that way now, that you have someone who loves you that you can talk to about it. Of course, it's okay to want to escape and get away sometimes, even physically getting in a car or on a plane and getting far away from your reality. Some people call that vacation, right? But as long as you know it's safe to come back to your life and continue there, feeling taken care of when you need it the most, and I believe that's what Andrew's road trip may have helped him realize. So let's talk about the sound of the song. The most interesting thing I learned about the song is that it was recorded in half speed, then doubled in post-production. That's why it's so hard for him to replicate it live. I enjoy this song just the way it is, but doesn't that make you just a little curious to hear the demo recorded at half speed? That would be a really cool demo to put out for those of us. That'd be a really cool demo to put out for those of us on Camp Wilderness. Just saying. Anyway, on that live stream where he's talking about this back in 2020, he compared it how. Anyway, on that live stream where he was talking about this back in 2020, he compared it to how the Beatles recorded some of their music and then sped it up in post. Fascinating. That's fascinating to me. I do like that the vocals begin almost immediately as the song begins. Besides the vocals, the acoustic guitar and the bass are absolutely front and center on this track in the first verse. But the piano drops in during the first chorus, and it becomes much more important as the song goes on. I do love that trick that Andrew uses sometimes, kind of holding off on the piano until you get into the song and then he drops it in. We as fans are just anticipating that piano. It especially becomes important in the song at the end of the first chorus with that piano melody that Andrew referred to that's so hard for him to play. It repeats again toward the end of the song. But there's just one thing I want to point out about this song that I think a lot of Jack's fans could disagree with me on. But I would be really curious to hear what an unbiased musician would think. I think At Full Speed is structurally a lot like Swim. At face value, no, it doesn't sound like Swim. There's a lot about them that are pretty different. There's a lot about the two songs that are pretty different. But it makes perfect sense to me that they were written in a similar time frame, and that only one of them made the album. The surprising thing to me, if this theory does hold true for others, the way it does for me, is that it appears in the same EP as Swim. I could see that possibly being intentional, I guess. But let me describe what I hear musically here in very non-technical terms, since I'm not at all a musician. Both songs follow this formula. Start simple and quiet in the verse, bring more in at the first chorus, in the case of this song, the piano, add more instruments in the second verse than what you had in the first, in this case, drums and the piano. Then by the end of the second chorus, we're getting louder. The vocals become more aggressive as we go along. Cue that guitar solo. Then the all-out rock and roll bridge, the climax of the song. Although the bridge in At Full Speed is technically a third chorus with a different melody. But finally we return to where we began. We slow it back. But finally we return to where we began. And we slow it back down for those final notes. Okay, maybe I've just described a lot of the songs we all know. But I will argue here that structurally, most every song that made its way onto the Glass Passenger album was pretty different from the next. But I'll argue here that structurally, most every song that made its way onto the Glass Passenger album was pretty different from the next. Therefore, maybe there wasn't room for At Full Speed on there, being that there was already a structurally similar song. But like a lot of the songs by Andrew's bands, I don't realize how technically great some of them are until I overanalyze them like this one. And then I can listen to them differently now, and they become new again in a way. So how about lyrics? If you've listened to a few of these, so how about lyrics? So if you've listened to at least a few of these episodes, by now you know I'm a lyrics guy, right? It's usually the first thing I notice about a song. Not always, just usually. And in the case of this song, I actually chose it because I was thinking about the time of year. And he mentions 4th of July in the very first line. Now, I don't see this song as a patriotic song at all, just like the last one I discussed. But by title and implication alone, I guess it could be perceived that way. This song, though, could be about how beautiful America is. Like just noticing those things that you don't normally take time to notice out in nature. I imagine that when he wrote this song, he was on his aforementioned road trip. Maybe he had a destination in mind by this time, maybe not, but just observing the details out the car window along the way. But some of these lyrics are very literal, reminding you of a road trip. Gas in the car, hours till sunrise, in between the white lines. But then you have the less literal lines, much more open to interpretation. Should the canyons burn all night long like the 4th of July? And then later, and there's no guarantee that leaving town's going to set us both free. But staying here, it's just not what we need. I assume that was a reference to his and Kelly's relationship at the time. I think the most interesting lyrics in the entire song, though, is in the second verse. I have traveled so far, and I've seen things I'd rather not say. But when you're traveling, it's better that way. The darker the secret, the harder you keep it. Ooh, cryptic and dark. I love it. So I'm just going to leave that one there. The last part of this verse is a little sweeter and clearer, though. Admitting his faults and saying what's most important. But it's no victory always running away like I do. I always know that I'll come back to you. Another reference to him and Kelly's relationship. And by the way, a thought occurred to me the other day about this song. I think I used to call it Going Nowhere. Why not, right? It's a very pertinent line in the chorus of the song. In fact, it may have been a more appropriate title, considering the content of the lyrics. But here's a strange coincidence. Going Nowhere is actually the title of an Oasis B-side from one of those CD singles I mentioned earlier. Not nearly my favorite of theirs, by the way, but I bet you didn't expect 2 Oasis references in one of these episodes. I'm pretty surprised that I made it this far into the show, though, without mentioning Oasis, since they kind of were one of my favorite bands of all time for a while. But Going Nowhere was also the 4th and final track off of that CD single by Oasis, released almost exactly 11 years before Jack's Mannequins and Valleys. That single by Oasis was called Stand By Me, which is one of their great songs in my opinion. Now my favorite part, but back to At Full Speed, my favorite part of the song, not just because of the line itself, but when he sings the beginning of the chorus, because America shines, Now getting back to At Full Speed, my favorite part of the song, and not just the line itself, but the way he sings it, the beginning of the chorus, because America shines, yes it does. Because that's where the piano begins. And I think we have some strings there too, if I'm not mistaken. Plus those backing vocals, which accentuates the line. Something about that part just gives me chills. Some final thoughts about the song. It's really easy for me to imagine this song being on a proper album. And I think it's fair the way it was released, though. It's fascinating to me to think about those decisions, though, on how an artist releases a song or a collection of songs, how a single's chosen, how track listing is ordered, which songs make it upon an album, why a song might be a better fit on an EP, or on a different collection of songs. But I don't know. I like to think that At Full Speed was intentionally put on this collection of songs. Who knows, though? It may have just been a leftover track from the Glass Passenger sessions that they didn't feel like fit, but I like to think that it's found its rightful home here on In Valleys. Thank you once again for listening. Feel free to DM me something. Thank you once again for listening. Feel free to DM Something in the Wilderness on Instagram or email somethinginthewilderness@gmail.com. And if you want to be a guest on the show, or if you just want to chat, thank you once again for listening. Feel free to DM Something in the Wilderness on Instagram or email somethinginthewilderness@gmail.com. If you want to be a guest on the show, or if you just want to chat back and forth about Andrew songs, I'm cool with that too. And I'm open to feedback. Well, speaking of road trips, we're getting in the car soon to check out a couple of Andrew shows here in the Midwest. And hopefully I'll see some of you out there. And hey, if you want to jump on the podcast afterward and talk about your experience at a recent show on the Hello Gone Days tour, that'd be awesome. All alone on a road going nowhere. But remember, you're never alone when you're surrounded by other Andrew fans.